The galactic battlefield had burned for centuries. Countless empires, fleets, and civilizations had clashed in the never-ending war for supremacy. The Dominion Armada reigned supreme, an unstoppable force that had subjugated species after species with merciless precision. But on this day something changed. It started as a whisper on the long-range scanners, an anomaly at the edge of the system. Then the alarm screamed. A ship. A warship, but unlike anything recorded in the Dominion's vast archives. It was massive, yet moved with unnatural grace. Its hull, black as the void, seemed to devour the light around it, revealing no identifiable markings. Energy signatures were unreadable, shifting unpredictably as if the vessel itself were alive. Impossible, High Commander Zyrel hissed, his mandibles clicking in agitation as he loomed over the war table. No ship should be able to penetrate the Dominion's perimeter defenses unseen. Fleet Master Vorkaz, an elder strategist who had overseen the slaughter of 1,000 worlds, narrowed his 4 eyes. His tendrils twitched as he analyzed the data. This vessel is not of our enemy factions. No known design matches its form. Zyrel's eyes flared. Then what is it? Silence. The vessel did not respond to hails, nor did it broadcast any recognition codes. It drifted forward with unsettling confidence, directly toward the Dominion's main battle group, a force powerful enough to level planets in mere hours. And then it stopped. A message blinked onto every Dominion screen simultaneously. You have ruled unchecked for long enough. The balance has shifted. The language was alien, yet understood by all. Zyrel felt an unfamiliar sensation slither through his exoskeletal frame: fear. The Dominion did not ask questions. They annihilated unknown threats before they could grow. With a single gesture, Zyrel ordered the attack. 15,000 Dominion warships adjusted formation, their cannons locking onto the unidentified intruder. The flagship, Oblivion's Wrath, initiated a full-spectrum weapons discharge. Pulses of antimatter, neutron lances, and quantum destabilizers roared across the void, converging onto the black warship in a cataclysmic burst of destructive energy. Nothing could survive that. Nothing. Yet, when the glare of the impact faded, the ship was still there. Not a single scratch marred its surface. And then, it fired back. A storm unleashed. The warship's retaliation was unlike anything the Dominion had ever faced. It did not fire missiles, nor did it unleash waves of plasma. It simply unfolded. Panels along its hull split open, revealing a glowing lattice of unknown energy. Space itself seemed to ripple and distort as reality bent around the warship. Then the carnage began. From the heart of the warship, beams of pure destruction erupted, silent, swift, and absolute. They didn't merely destroy Dominion ships, they erased them. One moment, a battleship stood ready to retaliate. The next, it was gone, reduced to scattered atoms drifting in the abyss. Panic spread through the Dominion ranks. This wasn't war. This was extermination. Zyrel barked desperate commands. Pull back. Regroup. Reinforce shields. But the Dominion had never needed defense. They had always been the aggressors, the hunters. And now they were the prey. Fleet Master Vorkaz trembled. His kind had crushed countless rebellions, had broken the spirits of entire species. But now, in the face of this thing, he saw what it was like to be powerless. The warship advanced, undeterred by the thousands of vessels swarming to destroy it. It didn't evade, didn't shield itself. It simply continued forward, cutting through the Dominion fleet like a scythe through rotting wheat. Then another message appeared. This is only the beginning. For the first time in history, the Dominion knew what it was to fear the unknown. A shadow from Earth. Somewhere, in the deepest corridors of the Dominion High Command, a desperate search began. What species had created such a vessel? Who could wield such devastating power? And then the answer emerged from the oldest records in the Dominion archives. A name long forgotten. A world erased from star maps centuries ago. Once thought insignificant. A primitive, war-torn rock. They had been left to die in the darkness, banished from the galactic stage before they could ever rise. Yet here they were. They had not died. They had returned. And they had come for vengeance. High Commander Zyrel's mandibles clicked uncontrollably as he watched his fleet, his invincible fleet, crumble like dust before the relentless advance of the black warship. The Dominion had crushed entire species, burned civilizations from the annals of history, and reigned supreme over the galactic battlefield for centuries. Yet now, in a matter of minutes, their greatest fleet was being reduced to nothing. This cannot be real, Fleetmaster Vorkes whispered, his tendrils twitching in disbelief, was very real. The mysterious warship had not slowed, had not faltered. It moved with an eerie grace, weaving through the battlefield like a harbinger of death itself. Its weapons were beyond comprehension, silent beams that tore through hulls, rippling distortions that crumpled warships like paper, and unseen forces that simply erased ships from existence. The Oblivion's Wrath, the Dominion's flagship, had just been the first casualty. Thousands more followed. And then the unthinkable happened. The Dominion forces began to retreat. A coward's choice. Zyrel felt rage burn through his core. Hold the line, you spineless filth. Engage them at full power. The Dominion did not retreat. It was against their very doctrine, against the very foundation of their rule. Their forces existed to conquer, to dominate, to crush all opposition. Yet at this moment they were running. Zyrel slammed a clawed fist against the command console, sending shards of shattered data displays into the air. Reroute all power to the planetary defense grid. We will not be driven from our own battlefield. The Dominion homeworld of Vashinar loomed behind them, a planet wreathed in the scars of countless wars, its surface a fortress of indomitable defenses. It was a world that had never fallen, not even once. If they could lure the warship closer, the combined might of the planetary defense grid and the remaining fleet could finally bring it down. Yes, that was the only option. Transmit a distress signal, Zyrel commanded. Summon every Dominion fleet within 5 sectors. This is an extinction-level threat. Vorkes' 4 eyes widened in horror. You mean to summon the World Breaker Armada? Zyrel did not hesitate. Summon them. No. The World Breaker Armada was the final line of defense, a force that had only been used against existential threats, species that had dared to challenge the Dominion's reign and needed to be eradicated down to the last atom. No species had survived its arrival. Zyrel turned his gaze back to the battlefield, where the black warship continued its slaughter. It didn't matter who these humans were. They would die. The message. As the Dominion forces scrambled to regroup, as billions of lives across the homeworld watched in horror, a new message appeared across every Dominion communication channel. You sealed your fate long ago. Now you will understand what it means to be hunted. The transmission was not merely text. It carried a presence, a deep, resonating voice that echoed into the very souls of those who heard it. And then the warship finally spoke for itself. You exiled us to the dark. You thought we would wither. You were wrong. We did not perish. We evolved. Your reign ends today. The World Breaker Armada arrives. Zyrel had no time to respond before the fabric of space itself tore apart. They had arrived. Hundreds of Dominion warships emerged from slipstream portals. Massive dreadnoughts, planetary siege platforms, entire mobile fortresses designed to wipe civilizations from existence. They had the firepower to destroy a star system in mere hours. The battlefield, once vast and open, now became a storm of raw firepower. And yet, the warship did not flee. Instead it changed. Its black hull shimmered, pulsing as if alive. Its silhouette expanded, new weapon arrays unfolding, new energy signatures erupting from within its depths. It was no longer a single warship. It was a leviathan of war incarnate. And then, the real battle began. A void of silence gripped the battlefield, an unnatural stillness before the inevitable storm. The World Breaker Armada, the pride of the Dominion, had arrived. Hundreds of dreadnoughts, planetary siege platforms, and fortress ships blotted out the stars. Each vessel carried the firepower to reduce entire civilizations to ashes. And yet, the human warship did not flee. It did not waver. Instead it transformed. The Leviathan revealed. High Commander Zyrel's compound eyes strained to comprehend what was happening. The black warship, already impossibly advanced, began to shift. Dark metal pulsed with unnatural energy, rippling across its form. New structures unfolded like mechanical wings. Its silhouette stretched, elongated, became something monstrous. The very laws of physics seemed to bend around it, as if reality itself could barely contain its existence. And then, it attacked. Not with beams. Not with missiles. Not with any weapon the Dominion had ever seen before. It reached into the very fabric of space, and tore it apart. A pulse of pure void erupted from the warship, spreading outward like a black sun-going supernova. The nearest Dominion battleships vanished. There were no explosions, no wreckage, just erasure. What is this? Vorkes screeched, his claws digging into his control panel. Zyrel had no answer. Across the fleet, desperate voices filled the command channels. My sensors are blind. I don't see anything. Weapons are offline. We're being scrambled. Something is inside our systems. It's rewriting. Zyrel watched in horror as entire Dominion ships, mighty dreadnoughts that had never known defeat, turned against their own fleet. Their weapons came alive, firing on their own. The Dominion's greatest armada was being hacked in real time. Annihilation unfolds. The World Breaker Armada opened fire in response, unleashing everything. Planet breakers, disruptor lances, annihilation torpedoes. The void itself shook with the sheer force of their assault. But the warship did not dodge. It did not defend. It simply absorbed. The attacks bent around it, spiraling into nothingness. Those that struck its surface were devoured by an unseen force, their energy repurposed into something even more terrifying. And then, it struck back. The Leviathan opened. A chasm of raw oblivion, a singularity of destruction that was not a weapon but an event. The Dominion fleet did not explode. It simply ceased to exist. A wave of black fire swept through the battlefield. Hundreds of warships, gone in an instant. Their crews never screamed. There was no wreckage. No escape. Zyrel gripped the command panel as his ship trembled under an unknown force. The Dominion's supreme fleet, the World Breaker Armada, was falling apart. This is impossible, he whispered. And then, for the first time in Dominion history, the order was given. All forces retreat. The hunter becomes the hunted. It was a command that should not have existed. The Dominion did not retreat. And yet they did. What remained of the fleet turned and ran, warships firing blindly into the abyss as they attempted to escape the unstoppable force behind them. But the warship pursued. Faster than any Dominion vessel. More relentless than any horror the galaxy had ever known. It was not a battle anymore. It was a hunt. Zyrel felt something he had never known before. Not anger. Not frustration. Terror. He turned to his crew, his voice sharp and desperate. We have to. Then the transmission came. You are not leaving. Zyrel's blood turned cold. The human warship was inside his fleet's command systems. It was speaking directly to him. And then he heard something worse. The ship was charging its main weapon again. Zyrel's mandibles trembled. His breath came in shallow gasps. The fleet was burning, warships vanishing one by one, erased from existence by a force beyond comprehension. And now, the human warship was speaking to him. You are not leaving. The words didn't just echo through his ship's comms. They vibrated through the entire fleet's command network, bypassing encryption, overriding security. The human warship wasn't just hunting them, it was inside their systems, inside their minds. A nightmare given form. And then the weapon fired. No escape. The void itself rippled as something vast and unnatural tore open before the retreating Dominion fleet. A spiraling vortex of lightless energy, the very fabric of space breaking apart. A trap. Ships in full retreat were suddenly caught, not by gravity, not by any known force, but by something far worse. The first ship reached the vortex, and Zyrel watched in horror as it stretched. Its metal, its crew, its very essence pulled apart into strands of light before vanishing entirely. More ships followed. Screaming captains. Desperate cries for help. None of it mattered. There is no surrender, the warship's voice whispered through every comm channel. Only consequence. Zyrel slammed his claws onto his command panel. Fire everything. The Dominion fleet obeyed. Hundreds of ships turned in desperation, unleashing their full arsenal into the growing vortex. But it was like trying to extinguish a star with breath alone. The attacks disappeared before they even reached their target. The final stand. Only a handful of warships remained. The World Breaker Armada, a force that had crushed empires, slaughtered billions, brought entire civilizations to their knees, was nothing now. A scattering of survivors, desperately trying to flee the inescapable. Zyrel clenched his talons. We are the Dominion, he growled, forcing down the terror in his throat. We do not run. He turned to his bridge officers, all staring at him in horror. Redirect all power to the main cannon, he ordered. Prepare for a suicide strike. If the Dominion was going to die, they would make the humans bleed for it. His ship's weapon core roared to life. Energy pulsed through the hull, overloading circuits, shattering bulkheads. The cannon would fire with such force that it would tear his own ship apart, but if it killed the human warship, it would be worth it. They locked onto the target. The warship didn't move, didn't evade, didn't react. It simply waited. Zyrel bared his fangs. Fur. And then everything stopped. The end of an empire. The bridge froze in time. The hum of the cannon cut off instantly. The crew were locked in place, unable to move, not by force but by something far greater. Zyrel could still think, could still feel, but his body was no longer his own. And then it appeared, not on a screen, not as a transmission, but in his mind. A shadow without form. A presence without origin. It loomed over him, inside him, around him. The warship was not just a ship. Your dominion dies today. Zyrel screamed. The vision shattered, and he was back on his bridge. Except, his fleet was gone. Every remaining Dominion warship had vanished. Not destroyed. Not wreckage. Just gone. His was the last. Zyrel gasped, staring out into the empty void. His mind reeled. He turned to his officers, only to find them collapsed, lifeless. His ship's power failed. Systems went dark. He was alone. And then, you were warned. His ship began to dissolve around him. Metal turned to dust. Light faded into darkness. The last high commander of the Dominion vanished. And with him, his empire. The aftermath. Across the galaxy, Dominion worlds suddenly found themselves isolated. No fleet. No leadership. No command. The great and terrible Dominion, the civilization that had ruled with an iron grip for millennia, was now leaderless, powerless, defenseless. 100 conquered species rose up overnight. Civilizations that had been on the brink of extinction took back their freedom. The Dominion's thousands of years of conquest ended in a single battle. And the humans? They said nothing. No transmissions. No demands. No messages. The warship simply disappeared, leaving only silence in its wake. The galaxy would never forget. The Dominion had called them primitive, had dismissed them as a minor species, had believed they were weak. But humanity had returned, and they had changed. Fire? Rocket.